The conference room was filled with fear. My supervisor pointed at me like I was contagious. "She altered the shipment log," she said calmly, loudly. Every head turned toward me. My stomach dropped like an anchor. I hadn't even sat down yet. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel surreal and overexposed. I could see my reflection in the polished table, distorted and small. People I'd worked alongside for 3 years suddenly looked at me like a stranger. Like someone capable of sabotage. My supervisor, Patricia Monroe, stood there with her arms crossed, her expression a perfect mask of disappointed professionalism. But I caught something else in her eyes. Something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't confusion or concern. This was calculated. Prepared. Rehearsed. I realized in that terrible moment that she wasn't making an accusation. She was executing a plan. And I was the target she'd been aiming at all along. The director's jaw tightened as he listened. People I ate lunch with every day suddenly found the table fascinating. They studied the wood grain like archaeologists examining ancient artifacts. Patricia folded her arms, and I saw it. The smallest hint of a smile. Victory in her posture. I felt heat climb my neck, spreading across my face like wildfire. My hands wanted to shake, but I pressed them flat against my thighs. I didn't speak. Didn't defend myself. Didn't cry out that this was impossible, that I would never do what she claimed. Because panic is what guilty people do. Panic makes you look desperate and caught. I'd seen it before in meetings like this. The accused person who talked too much, explained too fast, protested too loudly. They always looked guilty, even when they weren't. So I stayed silent and still. I met the director's eyes and waited. Patricia's smile grew just a fraction wider. She thought my silence meant defeat. She thought I had nothing to say because there was nothing I could say. She was wrong about that. Very wrong. My supervisor tried to frame me for her mistake. But the security footage told a different story. That sentence kept running through my mind like a mantra, like a promise I was making to myself. The words felt powerful, even though I hadn't spoken them aloud yet. Patricia didn't know what I knew. Didn't understand what I'd already started to figure out. She thought she'd been clever, careful, thorough. She thought she'd covered every track and erased every trace. But people who think they're untouchable always make mistakes. They get sloppy because they believe they're too smart to get caught. Patricia had been sloppy. And I was about to find out just how sloppy. I sat there in that conference room, surrounded by silent colleagues and a supervisor who thought she'd won, and I made myself a quiet promise. I would be patient. I would be methodical. I would be smarter than she'd been. And she was about to find out exactly how patient I could be. My name is Ariel Daniel. I've worked in operations at Northbridge Logistics for 7 years. 7 years of showing up early, staying late, and fixing problems that other people created. I was quiet by nature, reliable by choice. The person who cleaned up messes without demanding credit or recognition. I didn't need the spotlight. I just needed to do good work and go home knowing I'd earned my paycheck honestly. But sitting in that conference room, I understood something clearly for the first time. Patricia Monroe had decided I was expendable. In her calculation, I was the perfect scapegoat. Quiet meant weak. Reliable meant predictable. Not demanding credit meant I wouldn't know how to fight back. She'd looked at me and seen someone who would take the fall without causing trouble. Someone who would accept blame and disappear quietly. This wasn't the first time she'd crossed a line with me. But it would absolutely be the last. I wasn't weak. I was careful. And there's a big difference between those two things. She was about to learn that difference the hard way. 3 days earlier, everything had seemed normal. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the office felt drowsy and slow. Patricia rushed past my desk around 4 o'clock, moving faster than usual. Her normally perfect hair was slightly disheveled. Her expression was tight, stressed. "Cover for me," she muttered without stopping or making eye contact. She said it like a command, not a request. Like I was supposed to know what that meant and how to do it. I looked up from my screen, but she was already gone. Down the hallway toward the executive offices, her heels clicking urgently against the tile floor. I said nothing. I always said nothing when Patricia barked orders at me. That was our pattern, established over 3 years of working in the same department. She commanded. I complied. Or at least, I appeared to comply. But that silence, that automatic obedience she expected from me? That was her mistake. Because that night, something went very, very wrong. And Patricia needed someone to blame. The error involved a 6-figure shipment rerouted incorrectly. Medical supplies that were supposed to go to a hospital network in Oregon ended up flagged for a warehouse in Nevada instead. The kind of mistake that costs money, damages relationships, and makes executives ask hard questions about competence and oversight. I found out about it the next morning when I arrived at my desk. The system logs were still open on my computer screen, which was strange. I always locked my station before leaving. Always. Company policy, basic security protocol. But there it was, unlocked and displaying. Activity from the previous evening. My employee ID. My login credentials. Timestamps showing access at 7:43 in the evening, long after I'd gone home. Someone had used my credentials to make changes to the shipment routing system. Changes that were wrong. Expensive. Damaging. The digital trail pointed directly at me. Clean. Calculated. Cold. Professional sabotage disguised as employee error. And Patricia assumed I wouldn't notice the discrepancies. She assumed I wouldn't ask questions. She was wrong about that too. By Friday afternoon, I was called into a meeting with Human Resources. 2 representatives I'd never met before sat across from me with neutral expressions and a folder full of printed documents. They explained that pending investigation into the shipment error, I was being placed on temporary suspension. Paid, they assured me. Not disciplinary, they emphasized. Just precautionary while they gathered facts. Temporary doesn't feel temporary when rent is due in a week. When your reputation in a specialized industry is your only real asset. When everyone in the office has already heard the accusation and formed opinions. When silence looks exactly like guilt to people who want easy answers. I nodded calmly as they explained the process. I signed the forms they pushed across the table. I asked when I could expect to return, and they gave me vague reassurances about fairness and thoroughness. But I could see the doubt in their eyes. The assumption that where there's smoke, there's probably fire. Patricia had painted me as unreliable, careless, possibly malicious. And without evidence to the contrary, I was guilty until proven innocent. That's when I decided to stop being silent. To stop being the person who accepted things and moved on. I would fight back. Carefully. Strategically. With facts instead of emotions. I didn't argue with the HR representatives. Didn't raise my voice or insist on my innocence. Didn't cry or beg them to believe me. I'd seen people do that before, and it never helped their case. Desperation makes people uncomfortable. It makes them want to end the conversation quickly rather than dig deeper into truth. So instead, I asked one simple, reasonable question. May I review all supporting materials related to this investigation? I kept my voice calm, professional, curious rather than defensive. I'd like to understand exactly what happened so I can provide accurate information. The 2 HR representatives exchanged glances. They hadn't expected that. They'd expected emotion, denial, maybe tears. Not a methodical request for documentation. We'll see what we can provide, the older one said carefully. Some materials may be confidential during an active investigation. I nodded like I understood. Like I accepted that answer. But I also noticed something important. Patricia's eyes flickered when I asked that question. Just for a second. A tiny crack in her composed expression. Worry, maybe. Or fear. She'd been standing near the door, observing. Making sure the meeting went according to her plan. And my question had surprised her. Good. That meant she wasn't as prepared as she thought. I knew better than to defend myself emotionally. Emotions could be dismissed, explained away, used against you. But facts? Facts were different. Facts didn't care about feelings or office politics or who was more likable. I needed documentation that told the real story. System logs, access records, timestamps, digital footprints that couldn't be erased or reinterpreted based on someone's narrative. I spent the weekend at home, suspended but not defeated. I made lists of everything I remembered about that Tuesday evening. When I'd left the office, who'd been there, what I'd done before logging out. I checked my personal calendar, my phone's location history, even my credit card statements. I'd stopped at the grocery store on my way home at 5:37 in the evening. I had the receipt to prove it. My building security system logged me entering my apartment at 6:15. Digital breadcrumbs showing exactly where I'd been. But I needed more than proof of my innocence. I needed proof of Patricia's guilt. And something else kept nagging at me. Something I'd noticed months ago and then forgotten about. Something she'd probably forgotten too. The cameras. The building had security cameras throughout the facility. Most people knew about the obvious ones. The cameras in the parking lot, the main entrance, the warehouse areas where valuable inventory was stored. Those were visible, clearly marked, part of our security protocol. But there were others. Older cameras installed years ago when the building was first constructed. Cameras that had become part of the infrastructure, so familiar they were practically invisible. Including one mounted above the terminal room where the shipping computers were located. I'd noticed it once about a year ago when I'd been working late. A small black dome in the corner, partially hidden by ceiling panels. I'd wondered if it still worked or if it was just a relic from an earlier era. Now that question felt critically important. On Monday morning, I filed a formal request with the security department. Professional. Polite. Requesting footage from the terminal room for the evening in question. I cited my suspension and the investigation, explaining that I wanted to cooperate fully. The security manager was surprised but agreed to check. Patricia found out about my request by Tuesday. And she laughed. Actually laughed when she heard. "Those cameras don't even work," Patricia said to someone in the break room. I wasn't there, but Marcus from accounting told me about it later. He said Patricia was sipping her tea, looking completely relaxed and confident. Someone had mentioned my footage request, and she'd practically snorted. They haven't worked in years. Everyone knows that. IT disconnected them during the server upgrade. She'd leaned closer to her audience, her voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. "Drop this, Ariel. You're embarrassing yourself." The message got back to me through the office grapevine that still functioned even during my suspension. People were talking. Some felt bad for me. Others thought I was making things worse by pushing. But Patricia's reaction told me something important. She wasn't just confident. She was certain. Absolutely sure that those cameras couldn't hurt her. Which meant she hadn't checked. Hadn't verified. Hadn't done the basic due diligence that might have saved her. Her arrogance was showing. Her assumption that she knew everything, that she'd thought of everything, that I was too simple to be a real threat. I almost thanked her for that overconfidence. It was going to cost her everything. The email from the IT department came on Wednesday morning. The subject line was simple: camera footage request, available. My heart started racing as I opened it. The message was brief, professional, almost boring in its technical language. But the meaning was clear. The cameras worked. They always had. The server upgrade Patricia referenced had happened in a different building, a different system. These cameras were on an older network, independent and fully functional. Video retention was 30 days on a rolling deletion schedule. Today was day 27 since the incident. I had 3 days before the footage disappeared forever. The IT manager attached access instructions and a security code. He noted that someone from security would need to be present when I reviewed the footage, standard protocol. He could make himself available that afternoon if I wanted to come in. Despite my suspension, I was still allowed on the premises for investigation-related activities. I typed my response with steady hands, confirming the appointment. Then I sat back and let myself smile for the first time in days. Patricia had made a critical error. She'd assumed without verifying. And that assumption was about to destroy her. The security office was quiet when I arrived at 2 o'clock that afternoon. The manager, Tom Gallagher, was a man in his 50s who'd worked at Northbridge for 15 years. He'd always been fair with me, professional and thorough. He set me up at a computer terminal in a small viewing room. "You're looking for Tuesday, March 14th, evening hours?" Tom asked, pulling up the camera system. I nodded. Specifically, the terminal room between 6 and 8 in the evening. The footage loaded in grainy black and white. Timestamps ran across the bottom. Tom adjusted the playback speed so we could scan quickly. At first, nothing. Empty room, computers sleeping in screensaver mode. Then at 7:38, the door opened. Patricia entered the frame. I watched her on screen, moving quickly but not frantically. She sat at the terminal closest to the camera, the one assigned to my workstation. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, typing fast. She was clearly nervous, glancing at the door several times. Then she paused. Her hand moved to the mouse, clicking through screens. I couldn't see exactly what she was doing, but the timeline matched. 7:43. The exact time the system logs showed my credentials being used. My hands didn't shake as I watched. But hers did. On screen, Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she worked. I didn't forward the video immediately. Didn't call HR or march into the director's office demanding vindication. I'd learned something important over the past week. Patience and preparation beat emotional reactions every single time. Instead, I asked Tom to make me an official copy of the footage. He burned it to a disk and logged the request formally. Then I went home and got to work. I logged every timestamp from the video. Noted when Patricia entered, when she sat down, when she accessed the system, when she left. Then I cross-referenced those times with the system access logs. They matched perfectly. Her physical presence in the room corresponded exactly with the digital activity recorded under my credentials. I built a timeline, printed screenshots, created a simple document that showed the correlation between video evidence and system records. No emotional language, no accusations. Just facts presented clearly and chronologically. I worked until midnight, checking and rechecking every detail. Building a case that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Patricia thought I was defeated. Thought I'd given up. She'd stopped worrying about me entirely. That was her second critical mistake. On Thursday morning, Patricia scheduled a final review meeting. The email went to HR, the legal department, and Director Hamilton. The tone was businesslike and slightly regretful. After thorough investigation, we're prepared to discuss findings and next steps regarding the March shipment incident. She dressed sharply that morning. I heard this from Marcus again, who'd seen her in the parking lot. Designer suit, perfect hair, confident stride. She carried a leather portfolio, the expensive kind that lawyers use. Inside, apparently, were printed accusations. Documentation she'd prepared showing the system errors, the costs incurred, the damage to client relationships. All pointing back to my supposed negligence or worse. She was certain this would be her triumph. The meeting where she'd permanently remove the threat I represented. Where she'd solidify her position and her reputation by sacrificing mine. Director Hamilton had apparently pushed back on the speed of this resolution. Had suggested more time for investigation. But Patricia had been insistent. We have all the evidence we need. Let's resolve this professionally and move forward. She wanted me gone. And she wanted it done today. I wasn't supposed to be at that meeting. My suspension meant I was considered a subject of investigation, not a participant. But at 9:45 that morning, I walked into the building. Tom at security didn't stop me. Neither did the receptionist. I went directly to the conference room where the final review was scheduled for 10 o'clock. When I opened the door, 5 heads turned toward me. Director Hamilton, 2 HR representatives, someone from legal, and Patricia. Patricia's expression went from surprise to irritation to something almost like fear in the span of 3 seconds. "This is a closed investigation meeting," she started, but Director Hamilton raised his hand. "Actually, I asked Ariel to join us." He gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit down." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she couldn't argue. I sat quietly, placing my bag on the floor beside me. Waited while they went through preliminaries. Patricia presented her documentation. Walked them through the error, the costs, the evidence of wrongdoing. She built her case methodically, professionally. When she finished, Director Hamilton looked at me. "Do you have anything to add?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a flash drive. Slid it across the table. "I do," I said. My voice surprised even me with its steadiness. The room went completely silent. Director Hamilton plugged the flash drive into his laptop. The screen projected onto the wall. No soundtrack, no narration. Just the security footage from March 14th. Black and white video showing the empty terminal room. Then Patricia entering at 7:38 in the evening. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. We watched her sit at my workstation. Watched her fingers move across the keyboard. Watched her access the shipping system under my credentials. She was visible for 7 full minutes, working quickly but methodically. Making changes. Selecting options. Rerouting the shipment. The video quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. Unmistakably her. Undeniably real. No edits, no commentary needed. Just evidence playing in silent accusation. Patricia's face drained of color as her own actions looped on the wall. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the table like someone might rescue her, might explain this away somehow. But everyone was staring at the screen. At the truth she couldn't deny or reframe. The HR representative who'd suspended me leaned forward, squinting at the timestamp. Then he looked at the printed logs Patricia had presented. Then back at the screen. "The times match," he said quietly. Then the legal department representative asked the question that destroyed everything. "Why does this show your credentials, Patricia?" Patricia stammered. Her composure shattered like glass under a hammer. There must be some mistake. The system, it sometimes glitches. I was probably just checking something." She looked around desperately. "I check workstations all the time as a supervisor. This doesn't prove anything." I opened my bag again, pulled out a printed document, slid it across to the legal representative. "This is the system access log for that evening," I said calmly. "It shows Patricia logged in using her supervisor credentials at 6:52. Then logged out. Then at 7:43, my credentials were used. From the same terminal. While she was physically sitting there." I paused, letting that sink in. The system doesn't glitch that way. You can't accidentally use someone else's credentials. You have to enter their username and password manually. The legal representative studied the document carefully. Cross-referenced it with Patricia's presentation materials. The contradiction was obvious and damning. Patricia tried again. "I must have. Maybe I thought I was still logged in as myself. Maybe it was automatic." "Your session had ended," I said. "You'd logged out 17 minutes earlier. This was a fresh login." Then I pulled out the final piece. The document I'd found while building my timeline. Patricia hadn't seen this one. Couldn't have prepared for it. "This is an email Patricia sent to herself that night," I said. "Timestamped 9 minutes after the error was made." The legal representative opened the email attachment. Read it silently. His expression didn't change, but his posture shifted. Became more formal, more careful. "Can you read it aloud?" Director Hamilton asked. The man cleared his throat. The email was sent from Patricia's work account to her personal email at 7:52 in the evening on March 14th. Subject line, notes. Body text reads, handled. Ariel will take the fall. Routing error covered. Check tomorrow that system logged correctly under her ID. Complete silence in the room. No one moved or spoke for 10 full seconds. Patricia made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "That's not. I didn't mean. It's taken out of context." "What context makes that acceptable?" Director Hamilton asked quietly. His voice was cold now, distant. Patricia tried to explain, her words tumbling over each other. She'd been under pressure. The error was accidental. She'd panicked. She'd made a mistake in judgment. She'd never meant for things to go this far. But no one was listening anymore. The legal representative had stopped taking notes. The HR people were staring at their own papers, probably mentally reviewing protocols for this kind of situation. Director Hamilton was looking at Patricia like he'd never seen her before. Like she was a stranger who'd walked into his company and betrayed everything it stood for. Security was called 3 minutes later. Patricia cried then. Loudly, desperately. Tears that might have been genuine remorse or might have been fear of consequences. It was impossible to tell and didn't matter either way. She apologized in vague, general terms. Sorry for any misunderstanding. Sorry things had gotten confused. Sorry if anyone felt hurt by her actions. Too late. Far too late. Director Hamilton didn't look at her anymore. He addressed the HR representatives instead, his voice clinical and businesslike. I want a complete review of all system access logs for the past 6 months. Any anomalies involving Patricia's supervisory credentials. Any other instances that might indicate similar behavior. He turned to legal. Begin termination proceedings immediately. Security escort from the building. Full investigation into potential fraud charges. 2 security officers arrived. Not Tom, but 2 others I didn't know. They stood by the door, waiting. Patricia stood shakily, gathering her expensive portfolio. 7 years of confidence and authority gone in the span of 20 minutes. All the power she'd held over people like me evaporated. She walked to the door, flanked by security. Her perfect hair wasn't perfect anymore. Her designer suit suddenly looked like a costume. She never looked back at me. Not once. Maybe she couldn't bear to. Maybe she was already mentally somewhere else, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage. I watched her go and felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication. Just relief that the truth had finally won. I thought it was over after Patricia left. Thought I'd be reinstated, receive an apology, and return to my normal routine. Resume the quiet, reliable existence I'd built over 7 years. But Director Hamilton asked me to stay after the others filed out. He sat across from me, the conference room suddenly feeling too large for just 2 people. I owe you an apology, he said. Not just for what happened, but for not seeing it sooner. Patricia had built a reputation for being thorough and demanding. I mistook that for competence. I nodded, unsure what to say. Your instinct to document everything, to build a factual case rather than just defend yourself emotionally. That showed real professional maturity. He paused. I'm ashamed that you felt you had to do that. That you couldn't trust the system to protect you. The system worked eventually, I said quietly. He smiled slightly. Because you made it work. You understood that truth needs evidence, not just assertion. He leaned back in his chair. HR will call you this afternoon about reinstatement. Your suspension is lifted immediately, and any record of this investigation will show you were completely cleared. Thank you, I said. But there's something else I'd like to discuss, he continued. If you're willing. I waited. Director Hamilton pulled out a different folder. This wasn't over after all. HR called me at 2 o'clock that afternoon, just as Director Hamilton had predicted. They apologized profusely, more elaborately than necessary. Offered my position back, full back pay for the suspension period, and formal documentation clearing my record completely. They offered something else too. Patricia's position. Temporarily, they emphasized. Until we can conduct a proper hiring process. But the role was mine if I wanted it. Supervisor of Operations. Patricia's old title, her old office, her old authority. I sat in my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, and considered it. The sweet irony of taking the job of the person who'd tried to destroy me. The validation of being offered a promotion in the aftermath of her betrayal. But something felt wrong about it. Like I'd be stepping into a role defined by her failure rather than my own merit. I appreciate the offer, I told the HR representative. But I'd like some time to think about it. Of course, she said, sounding surprised. Take all the time you need. I declined the temporary position the next day. It wasn't what I wanted. Not really. I didn't want Patricia's job. I wanted something better. Something earned on my own terms, not given to me as compensation for being wronged. That decision turned out to be the right one. Because something unexpected happened next. The director of strategy and development reached out to me on Friday afternoon. Her name was Victoria Cross, and I'd seen her around the building but never directly worked with her. She invited me to lunch, her treat, to discuss potential opportunities. We met at a small restaurant downtown, away from the office. Victoria was direct and straightforward in a way I appreciated. "I've been watching how you handled this situation with Patricia," she said once we'd ordered. "Not just the investigation, but your composure throughout. The way you built your case, the way you didn't let emotion drive your actions." I listened quietly. "My department is expanding," she continued. "We're creating a new role. Operations Strategy Analyst. Someone who can bridge the gap between day-to-day logistics and long-term planning. Someone who understands systems and thinks critically." She smiled. "Someone who knows how to handle pressure." The job she described was fascinating. Higher pay than even Patricia's supervisor role. Clear authority and autonomy. Challenging projects working directly with executives on company-wide initiatives. "We've been watching you for a while actually," Victoria admitted. "Your work has always been excellent. But your response to this crisis showed us something important about your character." I accepted her offer without hesitation. This felt right. Not a consolation prize or a sympathy promotion, but real recognition of actual capability. I packed my desk slowly on my last day in operations. The department felt different now, lighter somehow. Patricia's presence had been more oppressive than I'd realized until it was gone. People met my eyes again. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner, for not questioning Patricia's accusations, for assuming I might actually be guilty. "You don't need to apologize," I told them. "You didn't know what was happening. None of us did." But I appreciated their words anyway. Appreciated knowing that people saw what had really happened, saw how Patricia had manipulated the situation. One of my former colleagues, a woman named Veronica, approached me as I was boxing up my desk plants. "I knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "That Tuesday when Patricia rushed out looking panicked. I saw her, and I knew she'd messed something up. I just never thought." She trailed off. "Never thought she'd blame you." I finished. Veronica nodded, looking ashamed. "I should have said something." "You're saying something now," I pointed out. "That matters too." I left the operations department with a box of personal items and a much lighter feeling than I'd had in months. Walking through those hallways toward my new office, I felt something shift inside me. Confidence maybe, or just clarity about my own worth. Patricia lost her job because she believed no one would check her work. Because she assumed I was too quiet, too compliant, too simple to fight back effectively. Because she thought cameras didn't work and systems wouldn't reveal her tracks. Because she got arrogant. I rose in the company because I knew my worth, even when others questioned it. Because I understood that truth doesn't need theatrics or emotional appeals. It just needs patience, documentation, and the courage to let facts speak for themselves. Truth doesn't require drama. It doesn't need grand speeches or public confrontations. It just needs someone willing to do the work of finding it and presenting it clearly. 6 months later, I'm thriving in my new role. The strategy department values analytical thinking and careful planning, exactly my strengths. I work on interesting problems with people who respect my input. I'll never be invisible again. Not because I've become loud or demanding, but because I've learned that quiet strength is still strength. That being underestimated can be an advantage if you use it wisely. Patricia taught me something valuable in the end, though not what she intended. She taught me that people who try to make you small are usually afraid of your potential. And she taught me that patience, preparation, and truth are more powerful than any manipulation. I won because I understood something she never did. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You just need to be the most prepared. and I'll never forget that lesson.